Hi everyone, my name is Adam Juratovac and welcome to my channel. Today's video is about everyday law, where lawyers come together and talk about news, court cases, and other social issues happening in the United States of America. And today, it's a real big honor to have attorney Claire Melahani. She's currently the Santa Clara County Bar Association's Barristers Committee President, so you know she has a lot of pull around this county.
Hi Adam, thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely, we're really excited to have you here because I know there's a couple cases that we're really looking into today. We're gonna give you a primer on two separate cases happening in the United States. One's in Colorado, one's in Michigan. We're going to discuss the Colorado case today while saving the Michigan case for the next video, so you have to pay attention to the next one. So the first case we're discussing is coming out of Colorado. Claire, what are the facts?
So in this case, Mr. Rogel Aguilera-Mederos was recently convicted on 42 counts total, including several felonies with mandatory minimums, and this led to a sentence of 110 years in prison.
And that's why this case came across my desk. I was tagged in a lot of social media posts and a lot of my followers came and sent me direct messages telling me about this case. And one thing that was very surprising was the 110-year mandatory sentence. Claire, is that normal?
So unfortunately in the state of Colorado, that is normal. Although in this situation, it's really compounded by several factors we'll talk about later. But yeah, Colorado has mandatory minimums that are much more excessive than in other states.
Another very surprising thing for me is that Mr. Aguilera-Mederos was charged with 70 different crimes. Now, to quote Mr. Aguilera-Mederos' attorney, he believes that all of those charges and all those crimes were overkill. He believed that the prosecution was submitting and charging Mr. Aguilera-Mederos with too many crimes. Claire, can you tell us a little bit about the crimes that Mr. Aguilera-Mederos was charged with?
Sure. Some of the crimes were vehicular homicide, which carries a mandatory minimum sentence of 2 to 6 years. Then when you combine those 4 vehicular homicide charges with the 19 other felonies that he was found guilty of, which all have mandatory minimums that have to be served consecutively, that adds up very quickly.
Mr. Aguilera-Mederos was charged with 4 different counts of vehicular homicide.
In the state of Colorado, vehicular homicide has 4 different elements, and I'll read those for you now. So the first is driving a motor vehicle in a reckless manner and thereby causing an accident that kills another person. So the key element of this crime is recklessness. Adam, can you think back to your law school days and talk a bit about what recklessness is?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're looking at a duty, think about any time someone owes a duty to another. Sometimes someone has some sort of responsibility. There's different degrees of negligence that someone can actually portray. So you have the reasonable person standard, which is this is the type of behavior a reasonable person would exhibit in this reasonable situation. And that's the standard. That is the standard duty that we owe one another. Now, when you're working in certain situations, your standard of care, the duty that you have, could be increased. Now, very similarly, it could be decreased. So where you have the standard of care, you can have negligence, gross negligence, and what's even below negligence is recklessness.
So now that Adam's explained that there are different intents that are associated with different crimes, the question here is, does Mr. Aguilera-Mederos' intent match recklessness? And in our opinion, it doesn't. So let me go over what recklessness is defined in the state of Colorado. It is consciously disregarding a substantial and unjustifiable risk that a result will occur or a circumstance exists. In other words, if you fail to perceive a risk that you should have, that's not sufficient. That you have to know there's a risk.
So what that means for the everyday person is there needs to be an individual who sees a risk in front of them. If there's an individual who sees a risk, and even though they see that risk there, they ignore it and they still act like it's not even there, then that could be reckless, because not only do they see a risk that they know they should avoid, but they're walking straight into it. And one good story my mom has, and that she's told me my whole life, is when you're walking on the street and you see a piece of crap on the ground, are you going to walk over that piece of crap? No, because you never know what's going to happen. You could slip and fall and step in it. You're going to walk around that thing because that's the reasonable thing to do.
Here, the question is, did Mr. Aguilera-Mederos perceive there to be a risk when he was driving his truck down a mountain? The brakes went out. Did he perceive there to be a risk in the way that he acted or failed to act? And really what people are talking about here is, did he have enough experience to be driving a tractor trailer down a mountain like that? And did he bypass truck off-ramps in a way that he shouldn't have?
And by the way, when we're talking about the facts of this case, everything is alleged. We're reading information from court dockets, news articles, as well as interviews. So we're taking all of our information from what's publicly available out there, along with some of our friends and subscribers who are sending us information. So all of this information is alleged. And I think what Claire was saying is Mr. Aguilera-Mederos allegedly bypassed multiple runaway truck off-ramps when this act was happening.
Yeah, but to me, I think the idea of him lacking experience and the proper training to be behind a truck's wheel in a mountain pass like that really falls back onto his employer. And if they really wanted to prevent this from happening in the future, I don't believe that charging the individual is the way to go. I think that you have to make the corporate entity accountable. The interesting thing here is you can file criminal charges against a corporate entity. And I think that if you're worried about drivers being properly trained, that starts with their employer. But I don't know, Adam, what do you think?
Well, absolutely. And that's a really good point. And one of the really big factors of why everyone is talking about this case in Colorado. This individual was not purposely trying to hurt anybody. This individual was an employee doing the acts required of him by his employer. So I'm thinking about this one case that has to do with Amazon, where there was a tornado warning in the Midwest, and Amazon still required its employees to go on their service routes to deliver these packages, even though the tornado warnings were going off, even though the sirens were coming off. There were individuals who passed away in that incident too, and I think some of the text messages are allegedly coming out, and some of the text message allegedly say, if you turn around, you will get fired, or something to that effect. What happened with Amazon is you had a bunch of truck drivers driving in the middle of a tornado warning, and when these truck drivers were aware of their surroundings and were aware that it was not a safe situation, they radioed into their employer. And instead of having their employer say, yes, come back, we have these warnings out there right now, the employers told them to stay on their route, continue, or stop their car. And I think I read one of the text messages that has allegedly came out where the dispatch told the individual, if you turn around, don't bother showing up to work tomorrow, or something to that effect, meaning that they were fired. Now, a really big fact in this Colorado case is that Mr. Aguilera-Mederos was an employee. He was doing his job. And while he was doing his job, there was a mechanical failure in his vehicle that was owned by the employer, or at least provided to him by his employer. Now, that's one of the situations here, is this individual wasn't trying to hurt anybody, and he was actually just doing his work in the ordinary course of his employment.
Definitely, and you can hear in his voice the remorse. I listened to one clip and he's crying and he says, when I close my eyes at night, I see the crash all over again, and if I could do this over again, I would have found a way to crash my car so that I was the only person who died. And you can hear the sincerity in his voice. But really, making an example of one individual truck driver isn't going to rectify this situation.
A lot of people are really paying attention to this case, and we could see that through a change.org petition that currently has 3 to 4 million signatures on it. And that change.org petition is requesting the governor of Colorado to grant clemency to Mr. Aguilera-Mederos. But that's not the only thing that's going on in the country.
Yeah, a lot of truck drivers throughout the country are refusing to drop off deliveries inside the state of Colorado in order to show support for Mr. Aguilera-Mederos in the only way that they know how, is to get the public's attention on this issue when their deliveries don't show up.
And I know I spend a lot of time on social media, so I've been seeing a lot of trending videos that are trying to discuss this case, who are trying to discuss Mr. Aguilera-Mederos' situation, because the mandatory sentences here, in my opinion, don't fit the crime of what he did. And there are a lot of people who are going to continue to talk about this story as it progresses, because Mr. Aguilera-Mederos is definitely appealing this conviction.
And we will definitely be trying to help in any way we can, whether that is signing the petition ourselves, asking other people to sign the petition, or revisiting this topic in subsequent videos and doing everything that we can to shine light on this issue.
So Claire and I are going to continue paying attention to this case, especially as it goes through the appeal process. She and I are going to continue to read the appeal and other informational news articles out there to aggregate that information to best give it to you the best way we can. So make sure that you like this video. Make sure you comment what you think about this case. Make sure you comment if you disagree with the mandatory sentencing happening in Colorado. The info section of this video will also include a link to the change.org petition if you want to sign your name in support of Mr. Aguilera-Mederos. So Claire and I want to thank everyone for tuning in to Everyday Law, where we talk about cases, news, and other pressing issues in the United States of America that everyone needs to know every day. Thank you.